Andrew Berry just walked into a pre-draft press conference trying to say nothing and accidentally said everything. I've been watching GM press conferences for a long time, and what happened in that room is one of the cleaner examples I've seen of a front office executive revealing organizational strategy through the specific architecture of what he refused to say directly. The question was straightforward. Mary Kay Cabot asked Berry point blank, "In the event that Cleveland drafts Ty Simpson, how does that impact Shedeur Sanders?" And Berry's response, the specific language he chose, the framing he deployed, the conceptual structure of his answer, told anyone paying close attention exactly where this organization stands on its quarterback situation, without Berry ever coming close to saying it in plain language. Let me walk you through what he actually said, because this is where the analysis lives. Berry's response to the Shedeur Simpson question included a specific phrase that I want to isolate and examine carefully. That any decision about adding a quarterback to the room would be made independently of the quarterbacks already there. Read that sentence slowly, because it is doing a lot of work. When a general manager tells you that a potential draft addition at a specific position would be evaluated independently of the players currently occupying that position, he is not saying the competition is open. He is saying the internal evaluation of the existing players has already been completed and locked in. The phrase, independently of, is not ambiguity language. It is finality language. It is a general manager telling you, in the most diplomatically defensible way available to him, that whatever happens on draft night at the quarterback position has no bearing on a decision that has already been made inside the building. I want to be precise about this because I think the instinct when parsing GM speak is sometimes to overinterpret, to find hidden meaning that isn't actually there. So let me ask the honest question. Is there a reading of that decision would be made independently that doesn't confirm the internal hierarchy is already set? If the competition were genuinely open, if Shedeur's status as the starter were truly contingent on how the offseason plays out, the accurate language would be something like, any addition to the room would have the opportunity to compete for the starting job. That's the language you use when you mean it. Made independently is the language you use when the decision is done and you're not ready to say so publicly. Berry knows the difference. He chose his words for a reason, and the reason is that Shedeur Sanders is the 2026 starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, and Berry needed to confirm it without confirming it. The Ty Simpson question is really the entry point to the larger strategic picture Berry revealed, because the more consequential disclosure came when he was pressed about how the Browns approached the draft relative to future quarterback classes. His answer here was specific enough that it deserves real attention. Berry described the Browns' evaluation process as a 13 to 14-month timeline, meaning the organization is always simultaneously evaluating the current draft class and building a picture of the following year's class. He said explicitly that visibility into future classes can have strategic implications for how you position yourself in the current year. And he noted that while that forward projection factors in, it does so with limited certainty given how much the picture changes over time. Here is why that disclosure matters so significantly in this specific context. When the Browns selected Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel in the 2025 draft, they were operating on that same 13 to 14-month evaluation framework. They already had visibility into what the 2026 quarterback class was shaping up to look like. They knew Ty Simpson existed. They had early projections on the depth and quality of the 2026 class and the potential available at the top of that draft. And with all of that information factored in, with full knowledge of what this year's class might offer, they still made the decisions they made in 2025. They took Shedeur, they took Gabriel, they built their quarterback room around those two players with a clear-eyed awareness of what was coming in the next cycle. That is not the behavior of an organization that views this year's draft as a quarterback reset opportunity. That is the behavior of an organization that made its quarterback decision with intentionality and multi-year strategic thinking, and is now operating on the back end of that decision. Berry revealing the 13 to 14-month process wasn't an accidental overshare. It was a window into an organizational philosophy that makes the Ty Simpson conversation essentially irrelevant before it starts. The Browns did not leave a gap in their quarterback room that this draft needs to fill. They deliberately constructed their quarterback situation in 2025 and are now managing its development, not reconsidering its direction. The Ty Simpson evaluation piece of Barry's press conference is worth examining on its own terms, because what he said about assessing quarterbacks with limited starting experience is more revealing than it initially sounds. When asked about how the Browns weigh injury-affected seasons in their quarterback evaluations, Barry described it as more art than science, which is GM language for, "We're not comfortable making high-confidence projections from incomplete data." He said the organization would treat an injury-affected season the same way they'd think about any compromised year, acknowledging that performance in that context requires different interpretation than a healthy season. And crucially, he acknowledged the inherent uncertainty in projections based on limited sample sizes. Now apply that evaluative framework to Ty Simpson's actual record. One full healthy starting season at Alabama. 1. His second year was compromised by injury, which means the body of work that scouts and general managers would normally use to project professional readiness is incomplete in a way that specifically triggers the caution Barry described. You cannot build a high-conviction projection on one season. You can identify traits and tendencies and physical characteristics, but the consistency and development arc that multi-year starters provide, the evidence of how a quarterback evolves under repeated competitive pressure, how he adjusts to challenges, how his decision-making matures over multiple seasons of starting, that evidence simply doesn't exist in Simpson's case. Barry was telling the room, in the language GMs use when they're being careful, that one-year samples create projection uncertainty that his organization is not comfortable resolving with a high draft pick when the alternative is a quarterback with 3 years of sustained starting experience already on the roster. And that contrast between Shedeur's 3-year starting record at Colorado and Simpson's one healthy season at Alabama is the foundation of the organizational calculus Barry was implicitly describing. Shedeur's evaluation isn't based on projection from a partial sample. It's based on an extended body of work across multiple seasons at a high-visibility program under the most intense scrutiny that college football produces. The Browns watched him develop over time. They saw how he responded to adversity across seasons rather than within a single stretch. They saw how the competition around him elevated or complicated his performance in real time. That kind of multi-year evaluation is what general managers actually want before making a committed decision at the most important position in professional football, and it's what Shedeur provided that Simpson currently cannot. Let me put a specific number on the draft positioning question, because I think it clarifies the decision in a way that abstract strategic language sometimes obscures. The Browns hold pick 6. If they select Ty Simpson with that pick, they are making a top 10 investment in a quarterback position that they already addressed in the previous draft. They would be doing so with a player whose professional projection carries the uncertainty that Barry described, based on one healthy college season, with the second year compromised by injury, with the full developmental arc that evaluators rely on missing from the available evidence. And they would be doing it while Shedeur Sanders, selected 143 picks later in the previous draft, is already in the building, having demonstrated professional-level readiness that an independent scout's evaluation recently validated in terms that couldn't be attributed to organizational bias or fan enthusiasm. The cost-benefit analysis of that hypothetical pick doesn't survive honest examination. Pick 6 is too valuable and too consequential to deploy on solving a problem that isn't actually a problem, at a position where the organization already has a player whose evaluation doesn't have the uncertainty flags that Barry was describing. This brings me to what I think the most important implication of Barry's press conference actually is, and it's the one that's been somewhat buried under the Simpson conversation. If the Browns aren't using pick 6 on a quarterback, and Barry's language makes that conclusion difficult to avoid, then what are they doing with it? The answer to that question tells you what the 2026 organizational priority actually is, and it points towards something that matters significantly for Shedeur's development: the infrastructure being built around him. An offensive line investment at pick 6, a wide receiver who changes the trajectory of what the passing game can do, a defensive piece that gives the team something to build a competitive roster around. These are the picks that you make when your quarterback question is answered, and your job is to build the team around the answer you already have. That shift in organizational framing, from finding the quarterback to building around the quarterback, is the most significant thing Berry confirmed at that press conference. It's confirmation that Cleveland has moved from the search phase to the development phase at the most important position on the roster. And the development phase is where things actually get interesting, because that's where the resources and the attention and the scheme design and the rep distribution all concentrate behind a single player in ways that produce real growth. That's the environment Shedeur has not fully had yet, where everything organizational is pointed in his direction rather than divided between competing priorities and competing quarterbacks. Berry's press conference was indirect confirmation that environment is coming. I also want to address something about how this press conference was received in the broader media landscape, because I think some of the reaction missed the actual substance of what Berry was communicating. Some coverage treated Berry's evasiveness on the Shedeur Simpson question as organizational uncertainty, as evidence that the Browns aren't sure what they have in Shedeur and are keeping their options open out of genuine indecision. I think that reading gets it backwards. General managers are evasive at pre-draft press conferences about things they know clearly because they don't want to eliminate options before they've been exercised. The evasiveness is strategic, not genuine. When Berry declined to say flatly that the Browns won't draft a quarterback, he wasn't expressing doubt about Shedeur. He was managing the draft process by refusing to remove any leverage from the board before the picks are in. That's standard organizational behavior. The substance of what he said, underneath the diplomatic packaging, pointed in one consistent direction. The "we have a lot of love for the quarterbacks in the room" line is the one I keep returning to, because it's the kind of language that sounds generic but is actually specific when you understand the context it's being offered in. Berry said it as the first thing, before addressing the hypothetical of adding a new quarterback. That sequencing is deliberate. He established the emotional and evaluative commitment to the existing room before engaging with any hypothetical about adding to it. That ordering reflects the actual organizational priority. The quarterbacks already there come first. Any addition to the room is evaluated in the context of what already exists, not the other way around. And when the existing room includes a player with Shedeur's experience record, his Pro Bowl selection from a 5-win team, and the organizational investment of a coaching staff that has reportedly built its entire offseason structure around his development, a lot of love is a significant understatement dressed in diplomatic language. What Andrew Berry did in that press conference, probably more than he intended, was close the formal question of whether the Browns' 2026 draft approach was going to include a legitimate quarterback competition for Shedeur's spot. The answer is no, not because they're not taking the process seriously, but because the process has already produced a conclusion that the organizational structure is now operating on. Shedeur Sanders is the Cleveland Browns' starting quarterback for the 2026 season. The draft is about building the team around that quarterback rather than reconsidering whether he's the quarterback at all. Berry said it in 7 different indirect ways across that press conference without once saying it directly. That's GM speak for a decision that's been made and isn't changing. And anyone who understands how general managers communicate, in what they avoid, in the specific framing they choose, in the sequencing of their priorities when pressed, heard the confirmation clearly. The competition Berry described as ongoing in public language is a competition that ended in the building months ago. Shedeur won. The draft is about building his team.